What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of KO Your Brand, the podcast for fame ready entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Katrina Owens, top personal branding and public relations expert. Some call me the go to, some call me a category of one. And honestly, that is the type of nickname or reference that people need to be making for you if you want to start speaking on more stages. And I know that this is a topic I seem to cover so much on this podcast, but it's so funny. Last week, I was on like a networking call with a bunch of speakers who are presenting in this online summit, the Standout and Sellout Summit, hosted by Taylor Smith of the Power Table Live. So Taylor hosted an amazing like networking call for all of the speakers, everyone that's presenting in the summit to connect. And as we kind of went around the Zoom room, everyone, I would say like 85% of that Zoom room, people were talking about how they want to speak on more stages. They want to be a speaker. They want to get paid for it. And I had so many thoughts back then. And I have just as many now. And I figured, okay, I'm going to make an episode that's all about how you can start building out your speaking career. And I know that I've done an episode on this in the past, but this episode is going to dive in a little bit deeper into like what you actually really need to have dialed in yourself. I think it's so interesting because that call really allowed me to see the types of personal brands that are wanting to secure more speaking engagements. And I noticed that there were like quite a few things that we're going to get into in this podcast episode, but I I mean, this is what I do for my line of work, right? So I can take one look at your social media account and know exactly why you're not getting booked to speak. So that's what I want this episode to be about. So I know I've got previous episodes. You can scroll through them. There are places, there are episodes about where to find speaking gigs, what you need on a speaker page, like the resources, there is no shortage of them. But what I want this episode to really dial into is like, okay, so you've already made the commitment to yourself that you're going to start speaking. Maybe you even started to pitch yourself. You're starting to see like what opportunities are out there, and you know that this is something you want to do more of, but maybe something isn't quite landing, which is totally common. And that's actually what I felt like what was happening on the speaker call. So, what I want this episode to be is a really honest reflection of what you may need to bring some attention to if you have spoken on a couple stages, you want more, but you're feeling like a bit stuck. That's what I want you to get out of this episode. I want you to know your exact action plan for how you are going to make some small changes to start getting the speaking opportunities that you know you deserve. Because everyone should be speaking on stage if they want to. I really believe that. There are so many events and opportunities these days. Like, you can make it happen for yourself, but you've got to have some things in place first. So that's what we're diving into. I didn't start this episode off with any kind of like personal update. I guess maybe because I don't have one today. I feel like I'm in the midst of not chaos, but so many things are happening around me. I'm at the time of this recording, I am heading to Nashville next week. I actually ended up extending my trip by a day. I was originally flying in on the Monday, flying out on the Thursday, end up changing my flight so I leave on the Sunday and then go out on the Thursday. And I did that because, well, first of all, there's only like one flight to Nashville every single day here in Canada on the West Coast. And I was feeling like my flight on Monday would get in, literally land 2 hours before the speaker dinner or the VIP dinner that speakers are invited to. And at first I was okay with that. And then as the event drew closer, and actually, when I first booked my flights, I didn't know I was speaking at Females on Fire. So I actually wasn't planning to go to that dinner. I found out, obviously, if you listen to the episode all about this opportunity, I found out after I like booked the trip and decided that I was going to this event and this conference that I'm speaking. So that kind of changed my plans a little bit. And the more that I thought about it, the more I was like, oh, I just hate being in a rush. If you know me, you know I don't do good in a rush. I gotta have time. I am already high anxiety, so I like to make sure that there's like enough time between things. I like to take my time getting ready. I like to make sure that I am grounded and centered so I'm not like bringing like anxious energy to things like this. And so as the event got closer, I was like, I really don't feel good about getting in literally 2 hours before this event starts because what if my flight is delayed? What if I end up having to check my carry on because they make you do that sometimes? And what if there's traffic? Like all the what ifs. And I decided that I would be staying not in the host hotel, but in an Airbnb with some of my business besties. So I was just like, you know what? The Airbnb is actually booked starting on Sunday. I don't have any plans next weekend. So instead of me just kind of like lazing around my house on Sunday, which I love to do, it really is like my me time. Like I really quiet the outside world on a Sunday. Like if you try to get a hold of me on a Sunday, good luck because I am not interested in talking to the outside world. I love to make it a day where Gabriel and I can connect a little bit more. So I was like, okay, what if I just change my flight? So I now leave on the Sunday, get in on 4 o'clock on the Sunday. That means I'll land. I don't have to be in a rush to get to my Airbnb. And then on Monday, I can actually just sleep in, do some work for the day, have a workout, have the whole day ahead of me before I then like get to take my time getting ready and going to the speaker dinner. So that's what I decided. And you should know something about me. I don't do things like that. Okay. I tend not to mess with the schedule once I've got it, but I am really trying to like just sink into this like natural flow and rhythm of my life right now. And that's what I was feeling called to do. And Gabriel was like, yeah, just, you know what? Just do it. So I did it. So that's that. And then today is actually quite busy. I've got to try and get some work done. And then we've got a pretty big golf tournament through Women with Drive Golf and Social Club, which is another business initiative that I'm a part of. So we have our biggest event of the season slash ever later this afternoon. Luckily, the golf course that we're working with on this is so supportive and helpful. Was quite a bit of work like coordinating vendors and all of that leading up to this, but it's all good. I've now reached the point where I'm like, it's not in my hands anymore. The universe will sort it all out. But yeah, I just want to be present in the moment, which is really something I'm trying so hard to work on these days. So Dexter and I went to the vet this morning because he goes once a month for a nail trim. And it is always like very stressful for him and for me because his nails like kind of curl into his paws. Like, even if we're getting them trimmed like very, very regularly, it's just like how they grow. Like, they literally just grow directly into the paws. And so he gets all like upset and is like yelping and screaming, and I'm holding him, and it's just always a whole thing. So now he's sleeping soundly beside me because I guess now the calming medication has kicked in. Great. Nothing like spiking your heart rate and your adrenaline at 9 in the morning on a Monday. Am I right? My gosh. Yeah. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm also wearing like my little like Frenchy shirt. Actually, this is such an old shirt. I found it because I was clearing out a lot of my old clothes. And I'm like, I gotta wear this shirt again. This is like me repping Dexter. It's so fun. So with that, let's get into this episode because there is so much that I have to say on this topic. Honestly. And the thing is, I'm on what I like to call the Katrina Owens World Tour right now. Last month, I spoke on stage in Orlando, Florida. Next week, it's Nashville. Then it's New York City. And then Toronto. And who knows what else comes up in between now and then. And here's the thing. This is not what I would have envisioned my summer as if you would have told me 6 months ago, but this is what I've always really wanted to be doing. I just never knew it was a possibility for myself. But there are some things that you need to do if you wanna start going on your own world tour, if you wanna start going on your own speaking tour. I'm gonna be really straight up and honest about, like, what you actually need to start securing more speaking opportunities and doing this for yourself, because clearly it is the hot topic amongst entrepreneurs right now, and rightfully so. Because speaking is a great way to showcase your authority, to show your audience that you are an authority in the field. But with so many entrepreneurs wanting to speak on more stages, it just makes it all the more competitive. So, the very first thing that you need to know if you're wanting to speak on more stages is you've got to have something unique and different to talk about. And that was actually one of like the number one things that I noticed when I was in this Zoom room of speakers. Lots of different people that honestly, when I look back, I don't know what made them different than anybody else that they were like competing in their industry with. Like there were a ton of like branding and messaging experts, brand designers, photographers, there's even a couple like PR people, speaking coaches. So I don't want this oversaturation to scare you, but this kind of goes back to what I was talking about in a previous episode about becoming the go-to in your space. If you want to be the go-to, if you want to start speaking on more stages, which is what the go-to does, you really need to be saying something different than what everybody else is saying. And you have to make that very clear right away. Interestingly enough, I even have had someone slide into my DMs this morning who is a brand and messaging or visibility or something like that expert. But that's the other thing. We use all these different words to describe our function, and like it actually doesn't even make us memorable. So I want you to think about this. When you're speaking on a stage, you've got to be saying something different. You've got to be teaching something different, especially if you want to start speaking to a higher level audience. And this is actually something I've been working on with my own speaking coach, because me moving on to this event at Females on Fire and speaking on that stage, my signature keynote, or the talk that I had pretty much perfected for Business Besties in Orlando, it has to change because it no longer fits the audience that I'm speaking in front of in Nashville. And I'm going to deep dive into that on a different episode, because there's a lot to get into about what that actually looks like. But I don't want to distract from like the main point of this episode, which is you trying to get more speaking opportunities and me telling you exactly what's standing in your way. So this is what like your unique position is what your personal brand comes back to. It's what event coordinators will come back to. And if you can't even define what your unique position is, no one else is going to be able to sense what it is either. And that really is what I help predominantly my one-on-one clients with, because it does take competitor research. It does take an external perspective to really be able to pull out how you can actually stand out and position yourself as the go-to expert. So this is something that a lot of people skip, because we think speaking on more stages means I have to have a speaker brand, not necessarily a personal brand. But what's so interesting? I had a client who's a paid keynote speaker, and she did this the opposite way. So she built her talk first, and then she built her personal brand. And she was trying to build her personal brand around the talk. But that's actually not an effective way of doing this. And when you do that, there becomes this disconnect between how you show up on social media and what you talk about on a stage. And that disconnect actually can't exist if you want to start speaking on more stages. The stage opportunities, the speaking opportunities, that comes from having a really strong personal brand. So people are always like trying to get ahead of themselves, create the talk, perfect the talk, hire the speaking coach, when really you should be working with a personal brand expert like me first to make sure you even have a brand that can close the deal on a talk or attract a talk. Because if you don't have a personal brand, you're not going to be invited to speak on a stage. Because this brings me to my second point. You need to not only just have a personal brand, but a personal brand that looks authoritative and credible. And the way that you do this is through obviously using PR. So, securing media features, doing podcast interviews, yes. But the other thing about this is, if we're not even like talking about PR, if we're talking about how to create your own media channels in a way that make you look authoritative and highly credible and like the expert in your field, you show up talking. Okay. And that is the number one thing that I see people miss. It's like we can spend all our time pitching to podcasts and pitching to speaking opportunities. But if we don't have any content of us actually speaking, articulating what we do, much like this content I'm creating right now, me speaking into a microphone, which Heather will eventually clip and I will post as a reel. Like, this is authority building content. I don't need to speak on a stage or be on someone else's podcast, or honestly, even actually have a podcast to be able to create this content. But if you don't have talking head content, and if that talking head content, which is really like this kind of face to camera type of content that is really popular these days, if you don't have any of that, and you also don't have like a sizzle reel or any content of you speaking on stage, yes, it is going to be very challenging to secure speaking opportunities, because event coordinators want to make sure that you are a credible speaker, that you can speak, that the way that you talk about your content and your expertise actually aligns with their audience. So this is actually like the biggest missing piece. And I'm actually so excited because later this week I'm doing a free training called uh, Hidden Gem to Headlines, which is all about how to actually create social media content that attracts PR opportunities. And I know I've talked about that in the past, but I'm so excited to kind of put that back on the table and bring it to my audience again. And if you're listening to this and you missed the live training, I'm going to drop the link to the evergreen replay so you can still like watch and learn, because that's going to give you some like really good visual examples of what needs to happen for you to actually use your social media to secure PR opportunities. And it's so interesting because I actually had somebody reach out to me at some point, like kind of questioning whether or not social media really does play a big role in speaking on stage, because this person had already secured some speaking opportunities without really having to show up on social media in this certain way. And let me tell you something, that's totally possible, but it's also probably going to be a bit of a fluke, because we don't live in this era anymore of like, okay, you are an expert in your field because like you have great referrals or testimonials. So yeah, I'll invite you to speak on stage even though you have no semblance of a social media presence. People always kind of like bring that to the surface because there are some highly paid keynote speakers who really don't have to have a social media presence, but that's because they established their career and their speaking career long before the rise of like this kind of oversaturation that we're seeing. And that is pretty much how people have grown speaking careers before all of this. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's not possible to secure a couple speaking gigs not posting on social media. You can manifest that shit. I'm not going to be the expert on how, because to me, creating a couple speaking opportunities and like kind of pulling them out of thin air with no strategy besides like manifestation isn't really like in my ethos. But if that's what works for you, totally fine. But I'll give you a good example of this actually, because my very first speaking gig ever came about 2 months after I started working full time in my business. I had like 300 followers on Instagram. And I honestly like was just starting to do talking head content on social media. Okay. And you know what's funny? I'm going to, because all of my content is kind of talking about this right now. So actually, after I record this episode, I'm going to post on Instagram stories, and maybe I'll do it on the KO Your brand when this episode comes out. But they're one of the very first talking head videos I ever done, still obviously lives on Instagram, so I went back to look at it, and, like, I have a filter, I'm a bit reserved, I'm, like, doing it in my car and sweating, and I'm so proud of that version of Katrina that, like, stuck through that, because obviously she's what got me here doing this in front of all of you right now. But like, I digress because I was starting to dip my toe into creating talking head content, but I basically got offered a speaking gig to an audience of 200 entrepreneurs, very established entrepreneurs, by the way, in Vancouver, 2 months after becoming full time self employed. And if you think you have imposter syndrome now, well, back then it was way worse for me because I didn't even really think, like, I had barely any proof that my business was, like, viable or successful. Like, I had been working part-time at a marketing agency up until that point. So while I had a handful of clients, I had just started to dip my toe into being a full-time entrepreneur. And this event wasn't just me standing up on a stage and sharing some expertise. There was actually some, like, high stakes attached to this event. So this event was Internet Masterminds. It was, like, the first Internet Masterminds, like, coming back from a resurgence, I suppose. And I'll be totally honest on how I got the opportunity. So, the long and the short of it is they were looking for another female speaker. That's it. And, a great mentor of mine from the Living in Balance space, Megan Shallow, was speaking at the event, and she gratefully passed my name along. We had only known each other for, like, maybe 2 months at that point. I had, like, just registered for Living in Balance, the mentorship program that I'm in. So Megan didn't even really know me that well, but, I mean, we kind of instantly connected. So when they were looking for another female speaker, clearly Megan knew that that was something that deep down I wanted, although I'm not even sure I'd really articulated it at that point, because for me, speaking on stages, and especially really big ones like that, really didn't feel like a possibility at that time, okay? But anyways, so the opportunity came to me, and there was a catch. I would have basically 12 minutes to speak, and I had to be able to provide a very actionable strategy to the audience. And the audience was gonna have, like, all of these foam balls, and they would be throwing them at you during your talk if they liked your strategy. And basically the speaker at the very end who, like, had the most balls thrown at them was the winner. So, it wasn't like I was just going up to, like, give a motivational talk or, like, to talk about myself. I had to provide a strategy in 12 minutes that was widely applicable to an audience of entrepreneurs that were honestly fairly established, okay? So imagine my imposter syndrome. Even sharing this now, like, that sort of invitation would still freak me out. Okay? Because now I'm like, what would I do if Matt, the founder of Internet Masterminds, like, what would I, if he asked me to do it again? Like, my talk back then was like, I didn't have a personal brand back then. Okay, guys, I was trying, but I was not like personal PR for personal brands expert like you see today. I was an agency owner. I didn't know. Honestly, I didn't know what I wanted to be known for. I really was just so new to this whole thing. So, yeah, proud of that version of Katrina. Obviously, I would do things a little bit differently if the opportunity came to me now. But what I learned from that opportunity was the power of relationships and just being open. But also, to be totally honest, it's not like I walked away from that event with a bunch of clients, because while I gave a great strategy, and actually the video, maybe I'll link it in the show notes if you want to watch the video of my talk. Like, it's on YouTube. Honestly, I crushed that talk. That talk and the energy and the feeling that I had speaking on that stage was actually what made me really love public speaking. And it's what, like, kind of lit the match on what I'm doing now, because I was like, "Oh my god, I love this." I've always been a bit of a performer, and obviously, like, I love to talk and broadcasting and all of that. So I loved it. But I didn't have an established personal brand yet. So while I was up on stage, people loved my talk. I got so many balls thrown at me. I didn't walk away with like people saying, "Oh my God, I want to work with you," or that sort of thing. And that's simply because I just didn't really have a strong personal brand. And if you are starting out speaking, you're going to be doing those things for free. And I know I talk a lot about like pay to speak opportunities and all of that. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this topic today, but at the end of the day, if you are speaking for free, I want you to make sure that it's worth it for you. And that means that you can convert the audience. And obviously, for me, I wasn't even thinking about that at that time. Like, I was just so grateful for the opportunity. And I really think like I really like took it and ran with it. And it was such a monumental moment for me. But if I were to do it again, I would be doing it in a way where I would walk away with potential clients. So that's something to keep in mind too. But, anyways, I share this story because obviously I didn't have a personal brand when that opportunity came to me, but it's what made me realize it's time to have one. And that really was like kind of the authority and credibility I needed early on to like find the confidence to do this work now. Because here's the thing, people are out there like glamorizing Gabby Bernstein, Mel Robbins, like, all of these like really big public speakers that do a lot of keynote speaking and have podcasts. And guess what, guys? They have poppin' social media accounts. You go to their social media and they're posting consistently and they have content of them talking to the camera. They have all of this stuff. So why do you think you, with your like 1,200 followers, why do you think that's an exception? What makes you an exception if you idolize careers like that? Why aren't you emulating what they're doing right now? Okay. And when I think about Mel Robbins and Gabby Bernstein and people like that, I'm just using as examples, they are people who became a really well known for their work. I mean, come on, Gabby, universe has your back. Mel Robbins, let them. Actually, before let them, it was 5-second rule. Like, those are the things that you need to start becoming well known for now so you can start to land more speaking gigs and become known for the work. But the problem that I'm seeing going back to this networking call is like people think that just because you can educate on a topic that makes you a great candidate to like speak at an event. And unfortunately, it's just not the case. If you want to be an educator, that's quite different than being a speaker. An educator is someone who can run great webinars and probably have a really interesting podcast or create great educational social media content. Or even, you could even be doing private sessions with entrepreneurs or executives. But what sets you apart from being an educator and a speaker, there's a performance aspect and there's this ability to, step into the more like famous persona of you, which is well known for the work that you do. Okay? So that really is the biggest thing that I see. People that tell me that they want to be speaking on more stages and doing more events, but then I go to their profile and I'm like, but what is the unique expertise? What is the differentiation? Show me that. Be able to tell me in one sentence what that is. And then I can help you with the next step. So, just for reference, like I'm going to give you a great example of like my unique position and differentiation. Okay. So, what I typically say to someone when I introduce myself is I'm Katrina Owens. I'm a public relations for personal brands expert. I help business owners feel famous without a million followers or without spending $1 million on a publicist. Okay. That's different. That's not me saying, hey, I'm Katrina, I'm a PR coach. I'm very specific in who I work with. Public relations for personal brands. Have never seen somebody else introduce themselves that way. And then my whole shtick is I talk about this famous feeling, how to feel famous and well known for your work without a big following, without spending money on an agency. And I wrap that all in. And that's unique perspective. And that's what I go on stage and I talk about. And when you go on my social media account to like vet me, so when I apply to speak at something or if I pitch myself to speak at something, that person can then go to my social media and like vet me and they see, okay, she talks about the exact same thing that she pitched herself on. So like this looks like a very good place to start. This looks like a very good person to speak at the event. If there's a disconnect, I'm thinking about like a client I had given some support to recently. It's like if you're pitching and you're not seeing tangible results, I would encourage you to look at your social media first and really ask yourself two questions like, is there a disconnect between what I'm communicating on social media and how I'm showing up in this pitch? Second thing is, do I look like an authority on my social media account? Are there videos of me speaking, holding microphones, leading classes or workshops? Doesn't have to be you speaking on a stage in front of 200 people. Could simply be you in front of a very, very small audience. But that's the type of content that you need to be showcasing so that people are like, yes, I think you would be a great candidate for my event. Okay. So those are kind of like the first, I guess that's kind of two buckets, right? First thing is your unique position, your differentiation, and then having the authority boosting content that really makes you look like credible. You're already doing speaking. You look like the expert, basically. That's kind of the second point. And then the third part of all of this is you've got to start making like the serious investments in yourself and your business to reach that next level speaker of you. And you might feel like I harp on this one all the time, but really is so true. So, like, let me level with you guys for a second. I, at this point, full time self employed, I pay myself the same. You know what? This is actually a full disclosure moment. I pay myself the exact same amount that I received as my corporate salary. Okay. And the corporate salary that I was receiving, not when I like asked for the raise and it got denied. Um, so I still pay myself my corporate salary. Definitely want to give myself a raise soon, but have some other things I gotta work on before I can do that. Everything else, I'm building some savings within my company. I have savings in my own personal life, but I am constantly reinvesting into my business, okay? Making sure my marketing looks polished, making sure I have the video content and the assets that really reflect me as a professional, as an expert, as the go to in the space. A lot of the time, I see people thinking that, okay, I just invested in some brand photography. That must be enough. And I really hate to break it to you, but like just having some brand photography when like you want to start speaking on a stage, that's not going to cut it. Okay. Because starting to speak on more stages and then getting paid to speak requires you to be showing up in a very, very different way. So, like having like graphics and Canva carousels and, brand photography of yourself, like while beautiful. Okay. I do not want to discount how beautiful y'all look in your brand photography. It's not enough to just have this content from like photo shoots and things like that. You've got to have content of you like being in the room, leading rooms, doing things differently than everybody else. That's what catches the eye and makes you look like you're someone who should be leading a room. Actually, that is such a great question to ask yourself. If you are doing your own little social media audit because you listened to this episode and you're like, am I showing up like someone that should be speaking on stage or landing more speaking opportunities? Go to your Instagram profile and ask yourself, do I look like someone who should be leading a room of professionals right now? If the answer is no, and I really want you to be so honest with yourself, the answer is no, then my next question is why not? Is it because you haven't invested in professional video? Is it because you haven't spent enough time pitching yourself to podcasts and landing those type of opportunities? What is missing? And actually, this is why my free webinar that is in the show notes, if you want to watch the replay, Hidden Gem to Headlines, this is actually why this training is so important, because it really dives into like the 4 types of social media content every personal brand should be using if they want to attract more opportunities. Okay. Because you really need to have a mix of content. There's this style online right now. I see a lot of business coaches use it where it's like, just all this B-roll with like different like text overlaid on top. And like I'm not knocking that. Like I do it and I think it's good for like getting your point across and all of that. But if there is no like storytelling content, if there is no like you willing to show the pieces of you that really make you the authentic personal brand that you are today, that's probably one of the things that's blocking you, because you're showing up like the function of your job. You're showing up like your job description. You're a business coach. So you're showing up with all of the tools and tactics and perspectives that a business coach has. But if you want to grow a personal brand, there is a little bit of personal storytelling that needs to come along um, in showing more of your journey and letting people see like a little bit more vulnerability. What do you think happens on stage, by the way? And I think this is something that we often forget. When you start to become like a highly regarded, paid keynote speaker, you're not going on stage and like teaching someone like your 3 tips for X, Y, and Z. Okay. Very rarely does a paid keynote speaker just get up and teach. You must be inspiring and motivating and storytelling and performing. And so that is actually why, I've never said this out loud before. That is why showing up that way on social media is actually really important. And if you're not, and you're just kind of showing up like all the other business coaches, posting like the same B-roll with the text overlays, with like telling people how to like make more money or how much money you just made, that's not enough. That's not enough to grow a career as a speaker. There's got to be more depth. People have got to get to know you a little bit more, because part of your job as a speaker, and especially one that's holding the energy of a really big room, like you've got to be able to connect with your audience on a deeper and emotional level. And if you can't do that through social media, I'm getting excited right now because like I feel like this is something I've never actually really talked about. If you can't do that through social media, if you cannot invoke emotion and connection through social, you are not going to be able to do it on stage. Okay? I promise. Because think about like the stakes when you're on stage. Okay? You've really got to dig deep and be able to like show up authentically and vulnerably in front of a large audience, many of whom you don't know. Whereas on social media, yeah, there's an audience, but you get to kind of bypass that part. I mean, you could just post and ghost. I don't care. I mean, like you shouldn't, but like if you post something where you're like, whew, slight vulnerability hangover, post it, put the phone away. But that's the type of content that people need to see from you. And I think a lot of the time, you know, I talk a lot about having a professional personal brand, but like professional personal brand doesn't mean surface level business. Professional personal brand means, sure, maybe you're not sharing like that you got in an argument with your spouse and your political views and, you know, some of the like things that you're working through right now or like your active traumas. We don't have to share all of that. Or if you're a mom, you don't have to share your kids. You don't have to share your kids' journeys. But as personal brands, there is still a personal element that comes into play. You have a story that got you here. So whether you're like a brand and messaging expert or a web designer or something else, there's a story that has to tie into the bigger impact that you're going to leave all out on the stage. So that's actually what I want to end on, because I think that there's something really powerful in this exercise. So if you listened to all of this and you're like, okay, Katrina, What are the action items? Let me run through them one more time. Remember, my free training, Hidden Gem to Headline, is available as a replay in the show notes if you want to grab that. But let me just take you through like the 3 things you should really start taking a deeper look at if you want to start speaking on more stages, because these could really be the things that are blocking you from that next level speaker version of yourself. Okay. So that first one is your unique position. Dial it in, know how to sum it up shortly, sweetly, and with so much impact that people are like, oh my God, tell me more. When I tell someone I help business owners feel famous without a million followers, that makes people's ears perk up. So regardless of what you actually do, you need to be able to like share what you do in a way that sparks curiosity. Okay. Second piece of that is the really authority building social media content, you speaking into a microphone, you leading a room, you on a podcast. Podcasting is the first step in speaking on more stages. So if you're like, I went on a podcast once and now I'm ready for more, quite humbly, no, you're not. Go pitch yourself to more podcasts, start getting on more and more podcasts. And that's what's going to give you the content that you need to start securing more stages. And then number 3 is really this like deeper reflection of you and your story. What is the emotional connection that you have to an audience? How do you cultivate that? How do you speak to that? Because being a speaker means invoking emotion and making people feel something. So I want you to get really good at doing that. And a great measure for this, by the way, is if you can host a webinar or a masterclass and convert people into a program or a sale from that, that means that you're really good at creating that connection. And if you're not, and I'm not trying to say this as a jackass, because I have like ran lots of webinars and masterclasses where I've converted 0 people, but that's the playground. That's where you're going to learn how to speak, what stories to tell, and what information to share to actually invoke impact on an audience. Okay. Okay. I love this so much. Honestly, you guys, this is the kind of intel that gets shared in the Fame Ready Entrepreneur Program. I would love for you to check out my free webinar, Hidden Gem to Headlines, first to really make sure that you jive with the type of content, how I teach, how I coach. You can find out more about my programs in the show notes. And also, what I haven't done before, but I'm going to drop this link in there as well. If you are interested in being a one-on-one client, the investment starts at $5,000. And with that $5,000, I'm going to help you create your speaker brand if that's something that you want to start doing. But it really starts with finding what your unique position is, your differentiation, and showing up on social media with all of that. And I promise you, honestly, this work is so powerful. Like all of my clients see opportunities just kind of start rolling in, no pitching required, because they know that they've positioned themselves so uniquely with my help. So if you're like, okay, it's time that I just like really commit to my next level version, I invite you to book a one-on-one call with me and we can talk about what that looks like. We can make sure that we're the right fit for working together. So my discovery call link is now in the show notes. You can head to that as well if you feel like that's a better fit for you than my group program. Okay. If you love this episode as much as I did, because this feels like really powerful stuff that was shared today, please rate and review this podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. Please leave me a 5-star review. Follow me at Katrina Owens PR on Instagram, at KO Your Brand is the podcast Instagram. And I will see y'all next week. Toodles.